Well, I'd like to thank the American Task Force on Palestine and the Foundation for Middle East Peace for holding this panel and for inviting me to be a part of this panel and to comment on how much I've enjoyed my co-panelists, and I'll try not to cover the ground that they have covered already. And I would like to begin my comments on the subject of this, the Iraq Study Group report, barely 2 weeks old. Some people may claim that it's suffered a crib death. I'm not sure that that's the case, especially if more people take the time to read the report over the Christmas period. There has been a well-orchestrated effort to make sure that that report does not gather momentum. Unfortunately, there hasn't been much of a counter effort, but I think that is not too late, and I think it would serve us all well. Not least, a Pew poll that I just looked at yesterday, in which apparently, it surprised me how high it was, 52% of American public was familiar in some way or another with the report, and of those, 60% agreed with the recommendations of the report, 17% disagreed, and 23% said they had no opinion on it. I think much of the attack on this has come from two places. Number one, an intentional effort to create a straw man and then knock down that straw man. But a second element, which is, it may be that people here have become tone deaf to a language nuanced, well-crafted effort at presenting some of the complexities of the world we live in. And we're so used to a vernacular of the axis of evil and they're with us or against us and mission accomplished, that when people come forward and say, hey, there's no magic solution, quick fix, and here are a whole load of things, 79 recommendations that you can think of looking at, we get a little deaf to that. And there are three sections to the report. There is the assessment of the situation, and then there is the way forward, a new approach, which is the external approach, the second section, and the internal approach. And those that are attuned to the nuances and the subtleties, I think at least would have heard the following. The internal approach, and that's the third part of the report, does not admit to easy solutions. There are plenty of things that the study group says, but I think their overriding message is there is going to be an interaction between the politics of this, the public opinion of this, and the reality on the ground, which may drive it more than anything else, which is ultimately going to lead American policy in a certain direction. Unless, which is a big unless, the stubbornness continues. Nevertheless, I think there are enough hints out there. I don't think it's coincidental that they talk about the first quarter of 2008. I don't think it's coincidental that they talk about not making an open-ended troop commitment, or that they talk about the effect this is having on U.S. military preparedness, or the effect of the U.S. military to respond in other parts of the world. By the way, on the internal approach stuff, and again, it requires a detailed reading that I hope people indulge in, there's much in here that is worth looking at, whether it's the notion that the U.S. should talk to all the elements except Al-Qaeda inside Iraq, Muqtada al-Sadr included, Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani included. They make the point that two of the three most important majority community Shia actors the U.S. has no dialogue or engagement with. When it comes to issues such as Washington not placing a block on the kind of amnesty that will be needed, when it comes to issues like the President making in a statement clear that there is no intention to remain militarily indefinitely in Iraq, and that the U.S. does not have oil interests, although that may be a bit of a stretch in terms of convincing people, right down to things that may sound obvious to all of us, like there should be an environment in the DoD, in the Defense Department, where the military can speak truth to power, or that American budgetary preparations should in some way reflect the reality of the budgetary costs of the ongoing war. But I would like to move on to the external approach. And I think it's not coincidental that the authors made their first 18 recommendations on the external envelope. And that came first in terms of how you look at the Iraq situation. And here I will disagree, because it's the one bit I disagreed with in Ori Neer's presentation. We should not fall into the trap of the linkage that people have tried to claim is there that is not there. And it is a straw man, this linkage that people are trying to establish and then knock down, and it's repeated many times. The latest one is today in an op-ed by Robert Satlov of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, in which he said this fear that the unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict could spin off into a Mideast-wide war. That's not the linkage that people are drawing out. Here is the linkage, and it's a linkage that wasn't lost on the authors of this, and I think is not lost on people who are thinking hard about what America needs to do in the Middle East, including, by the way, a very thoughtful piece by Richard Haas at the Council of Foreign Relations recently. The unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its centrality as the bloody soap opera that the Arab world sees on a daily, nightly basis on their TV screens, because the one part of the Arab world that has been most democratized is the media, in an era of Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, and Ziad spoke about this, are the images you see from the Arab-Israeli conflict. There is genuine anger. There are genuine grievances. This is not good for anyone who is thinking about how do I isolate, limit, minimize, shrink down to their more natural and dealable with proportions, the extremists. It is such a gift to our adversaries